Kill Us in Pink. Hyperpop is the suppressed feminine unleashed. I'm talking about the punk, underground, subterranean hyperpop, the hyperpop that has come about after becoming self-aware and giving itself a name, not the pioneers. The dominant cultural music of the West, hip-hop, is hypermasculine in chaos. Hyperpop is hyperfeminine in chaos. It is depicted in Hinduism that the chaotic masculine always submits to the chaotic feminine, as depicted in this image of Kali and Shiva. The chaos of the hyperfeminine is just that powerful. That is what hyperpop is to the contemporary musical landscape. I call it hyperfeminine because, much like how hip-hop is meant to be an expression of classically masculine traits on an extreme, toxic level, hyperpop is an expression of the classically feminine traits taken to an extreme, toxic level. It is the feminine in a chaotic state, all-consuming and destructive. Its evil is motivated by nihilism and a profound spiritual cynicism or pessimism. In a sense, it is an expression of a purer evil than what hip-hop musters, because it is evil for the sake of evil. Hip-hop is still grounded in rational materiality, but hyperpop, it's mired in the irrational. Think blindsided, intense emotion driving someone to a comfortably numb madness, making moral transgression a non-factor. The spirit of classic hip-hop is something like a shadow reflection of society. It still reflects patriarchal structures. It still reflects hierarchy and order. Hyperpop just burns the whole thing down and revels in the ashes of the collapsed system. Truly Joker-esque. This is why hyperpop sounds more deranged, vicious, and demonic on a psychopathic level. The concept of enantiodromia is very relevant here, a term coined by psychologist Carl Jung. Enantiodromia is the tendency of things to turn into their opposite with time. Hip-hop, being the dominant prevailing art form of music for the past few decades, has slowly started to give way to femininity. Think Drake memes.
Can you do something for me? Can you talk to the ops next for me?
Rock expressed hyperfeminine chaos quite well overall, right to its end with Kurt Cobain. An interesting sub-point to note is that male artists who seek to express this aspect of the psyche are inclined towards androgyny, as they serve as the vessel of the chaotic hyperfeminine. Kurt Cobain suicided rock along with himself as the dominant art form in Western culture, and then hip-hop succeeded it with all its hypermasculine decadence. Things have a way of balancing themselves out, however, as hip-hop has given way to femininity in its own way. When we consider the introduction of rock and emo elements and pain music, it has always been flirting with its antitheses and had already synthesized much. One such instance was always represented by R&B. However, hip-hop generally has not given way to the archetypal hyperfeminine chaos of the collective psyche. Classic hip-hop's feminine chaos, expressed by female artists and genres like R&B, is largely only expressed in a masculine fashion. It strays away from the visceral, archetypal feminine. Megan Thee Stallion, for example, is not raw feminine by any means. She's more like a caricature of a hip-hop man. It seems like classic hip-hop is not able to accommodate for such intense hyperfeminine chaos, as at its fundamental core nature, it is embedded in a shadow reflection of maleness and is not meant to serve as a hyperfeminine vessel by any means. While some artists are able to tap into some of the hyperfeminine energy, such as Trippie, X, Cardi, etc., they are still fundamentally hip-hop. A new genre was spawned then to address this psychic cultural need, and that genre is hyperpop. Hyperpop was born as a reaction to the lack of the chaotic archetypal feminine in modern musical art. The vocals generally have a feminine tone, the content is emotional, and the music sounds like screeching, like bats crying, or demons rumbling. It sounds like the psyche breaking. I love it. Hyperpop is arguably still hip-hop, but it accounts for all those elements of music and culture that were shoved aside for a while. Dance beats, pure feminine chaos, feminine expressions of emotion and vulnerability, creepiness and innocence, childlike trauma and an unnerving darkness. It dances on the fine line between noise and music. These are things classical hip-hop culturally does not account for, because it is fundamentally about being a man. While classic hip-hop has softened up a bit, hyperpop, using the base of hip-hop style music production, transforms it and uses it to express the side it suppressed the most. I don't know about you, but when I hear the two side by side, hyperpop is a lot more jarring, intense, and scary when it really wants to be. Hip-hop is calculated murder for money. Hyperpop is murder for its own sake. One of these is a lot more abysmal and violent, and it's because it wants to watch the world burn.
Some men aren't looking for anything logical, like money. They can't be bought, bullied, reasoned, or negotiated with. Some men just want to watch the world burn.
hyperpop still captures the best elements of classic hip-hop and shares something with what we've grown accustomed to in its flows and manner, but it remains countercultural. No doubt, hyperpop is the violent expression of a dying breed, and its influence has certainly become difficult to ignore in culture. It's already being absorbed into more mainstream forms. It still has yet to be properly incorporated into the mainstream, however, and has yet to blossom into its more balanced pop phase. It did originate in the essence of anti-pop after all. It makes a mockery out of pop, which in the modern era is hip-hop, while retaining some of pop's best characteristics, such as childlike repetition. I don't know if it will ever grow mainstream while remaining authentic, but once it does that, we can be certain that hyperpop won't be so hyper anymore. It can only do this once it stops being as chaotic and as raw as it has been. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Please leave your thoughts down below. Love to hear what you guys think. Kill us some pink, baby.